Okay, so we went over, last time we went over, if you guys missed it, we went over object-oriented programming in Python, which we just went over the difference between functional programming and object-oriented. Went over like how to create your first class, method, and objects with our airplane class. I think William, let me just let William know that I think he's hopping in later, that we are on Discord. Okay, anyways, so we just kind of went over the differences, and I told you guys about abstraction, inheritance, polymorphism, and encapsulation, and like kind of why this is the reason why we use object-oriented programming. I guess I can go in slideshow here. Let's see. This is the wrong screen. 1 second. Alright, there we go. So we talked about why we did that, and I kind of just glossed over some of these terms. So we'll go more into encapsulation, abstraction, and also inheritance today. And like at the end of our lesson last time, we went over kind of setters and getters, and there wasn't really a reason because we had just public attributes, so like you could just access them outside the just in the main with a dot whatever attribute, instead of using a getter, or instead of using a setter to set that attribute. However, we're going to talk about more private attributes which require setters and getters to access and set out in the main. And then we'll go over some very basic inheritance. So like we'll use our airplane class for single inheritance. I guess we can go over this. I can go over inheritance, but so we'll do some simple inheritance later on. And I'll walk through the code. It shouldn't take too long. Probably be done in like 30 minutes. But inheritance is kind of where you can use there are parent classes and child classes, and you can use a class that you've already built or a class that someone else has built to create your own classes, your own child classes that inherit the attributes and methods from the parent classes. So to go over a kind of a more macro level explanation, you can create a class for mobile phones, for cord phones, for earplugs, stereos, and then they would have a parent class of phones and sound systems, which would also have a parent class of electronic items. So you could say a mobile phone is a phone, which is an electronic item. So that's kind of what we'll be working on today. And mobile phone will obviously inherit all the attributes and methods of electronic items, and also it will inherit the attributes and methods of phones here. And kind of you can have multiple layers. So you can have kind of like here where it's inheriting all the way to electronics. You can have a child class inheriting from a parent class, which also inheriting from another parent class. So parent classes are also called superclasses. So if you hear that, that's just a parent class. You can also have a child class inheriting from multiple superclasses. And then we'll use our airplane class to kind of make a child class of biplane, because a biplane is a kind of airplane. And then we will, for like multi-level inheritance, we will use just very basic a parallelogram, and then a rectangle and a square class. Obviously, we can do this because a square is a parallelogram, or is a rectangle, which is also a parallelogram. So there's kind of a hierarchy here. We'll write some code so you guys can kind of see it in action. So this is where we were. Oh, you know what? Why don't we do the private versus public stuff first, and then we'll get into inheritance. So, yeah, let me delete this. All right, great. So here was our class from our airplane class from last time. I deleted some of the other code that we wrote because it's not useful here. But here was the airplane class that we had. We had a wingspan attribute, model attribute, passenger capacity attribute, location, and a fuel attribute. And we can probably actually simplify this. You know what? It doesn't really matter. All right, so right now all of these attributes here are all they're all, oh my bad, they're all public attributes. So instead of, what that means is, if say we created a plane here, we'll name it just plane. Oh. Okay. By the way, the good thing about coding in IDEs, you can easily rename your variables. So we have a plane attribute. It's just we call it an Airbus A380, wingspan of 350 feet. Its location is London. It has a fuel of 3,500. So if we wanted to access one of the attributes, say like model, we can just do print plane.model, and it will give us, oh, sorry, this is the wrong file. All right, it will give us Airbus A380. You can see down there. However, sometimes when you're writing code, you don't always want your user to be able to access the attributes. Like model, yeah, sure, that makes sense. But sometimes there are attributes that you would only need to use inside of the class. A local attribute, right? And you might not want your user messing with it or changing the value of it. Say you could have like a ratio of planes in the air to planes on the ground or something, but you want to keep that constant. You don't want your user messing with it or anything. You wouldn't want your user just being able to go plane.model equals and then just changing the plane to like a Boeing 747. Because if you do this and you print out the plane, it will change to Boeing 747, and you might not want that as a designer, as a software engineer. So what you can do is you can create, say let's make model. We can change model. You can refactor. You can rename it, and the way you can tell it's a private attribute is you have two underscores in front of it. So if you press refactor, it just names all the other models to underscore model. So when you see this, you now know that model is a private attribute. So if we try to access it, say, so right now model, we haven't, it's just be Airbus A330. And if we try to access plane.model, it gives us an error because it thinks that it kind of it lies to you, and it says that there's not an attribute called model, because obviously there is an attribute called model. It's here, but it's private, so you won't be able to access it from outside of the class just by doing this. And that is kind of the first part of data abstraction, right? That's information hiding. You're hiding the information from your end user. If you don't want them to access model, which you probably would, because that's pretty useful, but you can have say if you didn't want to change some like some internal numbers that you're just using for your methods on the inside just to make the calculations work, and you don't necessarily want your user to change that, you can make it private. So the question would be, how do you change model and how do you change plane from outside of the class? Because right now, if you did like, I mean, you can't even access it. So um, if you even tried changing it, it wouldn't work. Or I bet plane dot model. And if you tried changing it to something, etc., right, it wouldn't work because it's private and you wouldn't even be able to access it. So what you do is what we reviewed kind of at the end of our meeting last time, which is the get and the set methods. So right now we have a get and set for wingspan, and we can just copy and paste that and then just change the wingspans to model. And then this is also model. And now you'll be able to access it using the get, this would be changed. Get model and the set model methods. So those are your getters and setters, and that's the real reason you would use a getter and setter. And that would help you encapsulate your data. So that's kind of encapsulation for you. Very simple explanation of it. And just to show it works, obviously if we run this again, nothing's going to happen. So if we want to do plain dot get, or yeah, get model, we do it this time, we'll get a response. And then if we say want to set that to something, plain dot set model, and then we can set that to what we had before, which was Boeing 737. And then there you go. So you've declared a plane, and you set to initially the attribute to Airbus A330, and then you turned it by using set to Boeing 747, and then you printed it out by using the get method that we wrote before. So those are private attributes in Python. There's also something called a restricted attribute, which is just one underscore. And you are able to access that outside of the class. Out here, if we did, you should be able to. Let's just see, plain dot underscore, what do we set it? Passenger capacity. See, it would work, but see, it's yelling at me a little bit. You're not supposed to access it. It's kind of a warning that you're not supposed to access it outside of the class. So you can do it like I did here by just printing it without a getter, but it's just kind of yelling at you not to do that. So there you go, private, public, and protected attributes.